Hello silver friends, this is Joli from QuickSilverHair, and today I am going to answer the question, how often do you need to wash your silver hair? If you have silver hair, if you have curly hair, if you have curly silver hair, you have probably asked at some point in your life how often you should be washing your hair. And depending on who you ask, your stylist, your doctor, Google, or a Facebook group, the answers vary wildly. So I thought I would attempt to see if there was a real evidence-based answer to this question. Before we get started, I will say if you wash your hair every day, once a week, or once a month, that's up to you. It's a highly personal choice. I just wanted to see if there was a real answer to this question. If what you're doing works for you, that's great. Continue on. First, let's get started with the scientific aspect of shampooing your hair. The primary reason that people shampoo their hair is sebum, product buildup, and dead skin cell buildup. Sebum production is what makes your hair feel oily or not. Interestingly enough, the sebum that our scalp produces is a slightly different lipid composition than the sebum that our skin produces. To me, this makes perfect sense because those sebaceous glands are doing a slightly different job in their sebum production because they not only have to protect the skin on the scalp, but they have to have a protective barrier created for the hair. This leads to how much sebum is in the hair. Depending on the length of your hair, sebum is in the hair strand for a certain period of time before it starts to deteriorate. Mostly sebum reaches about the 6-inch point, and then from there it decreases drastically. So the longer your hair is, the less sebum you have from here down, which makes sense because many of us experience with long hair a rise in porosity and oxidative stress, and this is one of the reasons, because that protective layer of sebum is not present on the lengths of the hair. The curlier your hair is, the less sebum you have at the lengths because the sebum cannot travel down the coil as far. The straighter and silkier your hair is, the further down the shaft the sebum can travel and protect that hair. It provides sheen, shine, and slip to your hair. And then the coarser your hair, probably the drier your hair. Another factor that comes into play here is age, then sex, and ethnicity. Men and women produce different amounts of sebum because sebum is dictated by the male hormones. Women have less of those male hormones, and we have even less of those as we age. In fact, after the age of 40, women's sebum production decreases, and then after the age of 60, it decreases even further, which makes perfect sense because perimenopause and postmenopause happen usually between the ages of 40 and 60. Then African American hair texture is coarser and drier in general, so they have a little bit more issue with keeping that sebum in the hair strand. Next factor that comes into play is your activity level. Are you outside all the time? Do you go swimming all the time? Are you working out a lot? These are factors that are gonna, kind of dictate how often you produce sweat and more sebum and more buildup on the scalp, and how much more you will be wanting to wash your hair, or in the case of swimming, having chlorine in your hair and wanting to remove that. So there's some of the scientific data or info, if you will. Then from a medical standpoint, you will be shampooing differently depending on whether you have psoriasis or eczema or dandruff or any other scalp conditions. One of the things that I will say here is, no matter what the hard and fast rules are, always make sure you're using your medicated products to help with those conditions so that you don't end up with a severe issue at some other point. Another factor that will come into play with the silver hair community is heat exposure. Because when we are grooming our hair, many of us have to use heat style tools to achieve the style that we want. I think that, washing and styling as minimally as possible will reduce the potential for yellowing from heat damage. So I know that that comes into play also, and wanted to mention that because that's a unique issue to those of us with silver hair. These factors, whether you are female, over the age of 40, over the age of 60, if you're African American, if you have curly hair, if you have long hair. These are all factors in how often you should be washing your hair. The main answer that I found that was pretty much true across the board, no matter what those factors were, is that shampooing less was far more beneficial to your hair than shampooing all the time, unless you have a medical condition or a greasy scalp. The main point that I found also was that the longer your hair is, the more you wanted to focus on conditioning, which completely made sense, because if that lipid production is decreasing from here down, you want to make sure that you're protecting that hair from the elements. And you do that by making sure it's properly conditioned. Because then, we're adding in from a external standpoint what the sebaceous glands were trying to achieve from an internal standpoint. And that comes with conditioning, not with shampooing. That brings me to what people are actually doing. To get this answer, I polled my audience on Facebook to see what they actually said, to see what they were actually doing. My question was, how often do you shampoo? And was this more or less than you shampooed before you ditched the dye? 80 of you participated in answering this question, and I appreciate that so very much. These are the results of that questioning. 5 of you answered with daily, 30 of you answered with every other day or 2 to 3 times a week, 20 of you answered with once or twice a week, and 7 of you answered with every 7 to 10 days. Question of whether you washed your hair less or more than before you ditched the dye. 32 of you answered less, 5 of you answered more, and 21 of you answered the same. I found it very interesting that my tiny little poll lined up perfectly with the data that I also found out there, which was that most people wash their hair every other day or 2 to 3 times a week. Now, what changes? Why are most people washing their hair that way versus what we hear in some of these groups where you should only wash your hair once every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever? I think it does come back to your ethnicity and your hair type. If you have that kinky, coily hair that's a little bit drier, it is a little bit better for you to delay those wash days and focus on conditioning. And I think, as we age and our scalp dries out a little bit more, we probably are going to start washing our hair a little less. So I have some tips for you on extending your wash days and, things to look for that indicate that you're washing too much or not enough. Signs that you're washing too often are that your hair is getting dry, it's brittle, it's getting really frizzy, or your scalp is dry and irritated. Signs that you're washing not often enough are that you have a buildup on your scalp, your hair is limp or lifeless, or feels producty. That would indicate that you've probably got some buildup on your hair and you need to wash a little bit more frequently. One tip to washing your hair, especially if you have to wash it frequently, is to focus the shampooing strictly to your scalp. Massage your shampoo into your scalp. You can use a massage brush or your fingertips, and only let the shampoo just run through the lengths of your hair. This is actually how I wash my hair. And I actually wash my hair every other day. Sometimes, since I have gone through menopause and since I ditched the dye, I can extend my wash days to a 3rd day. Generally, that depends on how I've been wearing my hair. Like if I've had it in a bun or a braid, I can get away with going a little bit longer with washing. But just washing your scalp allows you to do what the shampoo is actually designed to do, and that is to cleanse your scalp. And then it protects the lengths of your hair by not stripping off that moisture. And then when you're done with that, if you have long hair or curly hair, focus your conditioner, especially from about eye and ear level down, so that the lengths of your hair and the curl in your hair get really good conditioning. Remember that silver hair has a slightly raised cuticle, and that means it needs a little bit more protection. Most people with silver hair find that they must have conditioner, and based on everything that I've found and all of the scientific data, the bottom line was shampoo less and condition as much as you can. I would say, like for me, when I shampoo, I always condition and I always use leave-in. And I highly suggest, no matter what your hair pattern is, whether you have straight hair or curly hair, that you always use a leave-in. And bonus points if that leave-in has UV and heat protection. I think it's really important if you do use heat to style your hair that you, wash your hair less often and maybe use dry shampoo in between, because this will protect your hair from that constant exposure to heat. If you wash your hair daily and you are using heat daily, make sure that your leave-in product has heat protection in it up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. I want to make a note here about those of you who do wash your hair every single day. If you are shampooing only, you are drastically reducing the sebum levels in your hair, and you are stripping it of that natural protective layer. So make sure that you are following your daily shampoos with conditioner. It is not advised not to use conditioner with silver hair, because the drier it gets, the more susceptible it is to damage. All right, before I take off from this video, I do want to hear from you. So I would love to hear how often you wash your hair. So please comment below in the comments section and let me know how often you wash your hair. Was this less or more than before you ditched the dye, if you dyed your hair? And, tell me about your hair type. I would love to hear more about this because this is fascinating to me. If you liked this video and it was helpful to you, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so now, because I would love to see you next time. And until then, shine on.